I mean, I think that from Andrea and her lack of dealing with fiscal and also probably state records.
Okay, welcome everybody. I'm happy to call our April meeting and the final meeting of the spring semester to order. We'll begin with the roll call.
Everybody here online? We tested earlier, everybody. Fine. Can someone say something online so that we can make sure that we can hear you?
Dot here.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. Now stop saying it.
Caramanica? Carmen, here. Endless. Okay.
Here.
Thomas. Davis.
Davis is here.
Okay, thank you. Joyce.
Here.
Dut.
Here.
Dyer.
I'm here online.
Edelman. Here. Alman. Urban. Evans.
Here.
Galt. Gracias.
Here.
Green. Here. Hadley.
Here.
Hampton.
Here.
Yara Cosmino.
Here.
Melissa.
Here.
Here.
Nice.
Here.
Kramer. Here. Lee. Gavin. Lee.
Yeah.
Leanne. McKinnon.
Here.
Oliveri Parker.
Here.
Here. Rollins.
McClenny's here. I didn't hear my name.
Okay, thank you. Rollins. Scullen.
Here.
Shepherd.
Here.
And shoot.
Sydney's here.
Thank you. Knives. Stoutmeyer. Sweat.
I'm Nathan Carnes, Roxing. Thank you.
Knights. Albert. Van Balen.
Here.
Weber.
Here.
Way.
Here.
Williams. Walker. Yoder. get it through now. He's looking at the agenda.
By the way, I know the lights are a little distracting, but apparently they're somehow connected to the technology of audio and visual, so we're not touching anything. Let's deal with it. Minutes were approved electronically. Thank you for that. We'll now turn our attention to our administrative reports.
Good afternoon. I'm going to highlight three things, and then I'll either take any questions you have, or we can wait and have the provost say his remarks and take them all together. I'm going to start with parking, because that's where we left off last time. So I think everybody's well informed on what that process is, but I want to go over it one more time because now it's going to unfurl. Every policy that goes through the university goes through a program called Policy Staff that allows us to put all that information out there, gather public comment from everybody inside the university community and outside of it, where it makes sense. And then that public comment gets figured into policy, right? And it might change the policy, it might not, but it gives us a chance to go through that. As I said last time, we're going to do that with the parking code. We moved, I'm going to use this example. When I arrived at the University of West Georgia, you could, anybody could request a facilities project at any time, on any day. It didn't really matter who you were. And the minute that happened, facilities started working. And that doesn't make any sense because nobody else in this room just starts working on something because anybody says, hey, we got to go and work on this thing. And it cost us a lot of money and a lot of time, and it was a lot of waste. And I say that because, you know, if Dr. Hester puts in a wonderful idea to, you know, build a brand new building for the African American Male Initiative, and I just saw him at an event that was a celebratory event for that component of his job, people would start working on that building. Now, with all due respect to Dr. Hester, he does not have the ability to just build a building. And as president, neither do I. There's a lot of process that goes through that. But you still have a lot of people working. So we moved to a process where on a quarterly basis, we approve new facilities projects. And then in between, facilities gets a chance to actually work on the approved projects and get a lot more things done rather than working on what we could be doing. They're working on what we're actually doing. Many of you are experiencing the products of that work because we have moved from the day Jeremy McClellan started as the AVP over campus development and sustainability, from about 35% of the work in facilities being reactive, i.e. this is broken, please come fix it, to now over 85% of the work being proactive, which means you didn't see it break because they got a chance to get to it before anybody experienced it. Well, we want to do the same thing with parking and other services like that. Move to planned work where in an iterative fashion, we can gather people's input about, you know, how a certain service is working for them, and then change it on a cadence as well. So Elizabeth Smith, along with Gavin Lee, representatives from Staff Advisory Council, SGA, worked through a great initial input session on what's working and what's not in the parking code. As we said last time, we'll change that once a year. So whatever we have as parking code in fall, it'll last through the year, except if something is, you know, drastically wrong, we'll obviously fix that. But we want to make certain that we can just plan that work. And then we'll go through every spring an opportunity for the university community to provide input on what's working and what's not, knowing on the front end that everybody is not going to be happy with any scenario that we ever come up with, ever. But you do know that every year you can put all of those kind of complaints or good ideas or whatnot, or please preserve this one aspect of it into that kitty so that everybody gets great visibility on it. That's going to happen over the next few weeks. Elizabeth Smith's going to start socializing a draft of that, of a parking code. Everybody will be able to comment on that draft of the parking code, and then we'll go and institute a final version for the fall. So I appreciate that because the question was first raised in here about kind of a change to parking. That question was a good one. An answer in just kind of making one change doesn't make sense in isolation. But we've now developed a process that we can all count on. We all know how it works. So when we hire somebody new at the University of West Georgia and they go, "Hey, I don't like parking," you go, "Great, neither do we." But we have a process for putting those comments in and making sure there's changes on an annualized basis. That being said, let me shift over to legislative update. I sent everybody an update about a week or two ago, day after Sine Die, which is the end of the legislative session. So let me tell you where we're at right now as an update to that, because there's a lot of moving parts even after session's over. One, this was probably the most intense legislative session we've been through in terms of advocacy on the part of the University of West Georgia. Getting the result of having the Pafford project come out of the conference committee was a big deal, a really big deal, because it wasn't in the governor's budget originally. It's not in the governor's budget. Generally speaking, a school like the University of West Georgia is just out of luck. Well, we're not out of luck. At least revived it from conference and sitting on the governor's desk. Now, the governor of the state of Georgia still can make all kinds of changes to that budget. We're going to see where that turns out. I mean, I will tell you, the type of legislative support we had for that project was significant. It's a great project for this university, but it's also a really great project for the state. And we will continue down that road until we get that project done. That being said, the last day of legislative session, as I announced and or included in that communication, did include a $66 million cut to the university system of Georgia. That had nothing to do with us, but it may impact us. I say may because that's not settled on. About 85% of the carry forward money that exists in the USG system exists at 6 institutions, not 26. Okay. And part of that cut was linked to the Senate's criticism of the university system of Georgia, all institutions combined, carrying carry forward. For those of you who aren't familiar with carry forward, we are legally allowed to take money from one budget year up to a certain threshold based on the size and scope of your institution, having everything to do with the number of students, but more importantly, the number of credit hours, and carry it over to the next year. It creates a very shallow security blanket for an institution like ours. But for a much larger institution, those dollars can get invested in a wide variety of different ways, and they are or can be substantial. Well, not everybody views that as a good thing, because when you have state dollars applied to a particular budget year for a state university, they expect you to invest it inside of that budget year. So there's been some criticism of that carry forward, and that's part of why you see that $66 million cut, which started as more than $100 million. So I say that it started off as $105 million and ended up at 66. I was told by the chancellor yesterday that the board is not going to act on budget matters in this coming week. The agenda for the Board of Regents came out, and we're not going to have that piece resolved. And it can be resolved via a wide variety of different means, none of which are under our control. They're really all up to the Board of Regents. If you have a higher cost for any product, you can always raise the price. And when you raise the price, you bring in more revenue, and that can cover some of that increased costs or whatever your gap is. That is a lever that the Board of Regents could pull. We'll have to see. That's not under our control. Additionally, they have figured out other ways to mitigate losses to certain institutions in favor of giving those to institutions that can bear that a little better. I don't know where it's going to end up right now. We still have 5 or 6 weeks of work to do on it. I say that because that means our forecasting for budget year 24, which begins July 1st, is going to slow. And we were already expecting, a pretty good diminished allocation in our state allocation. Bear in mind that state allocations are always based on whatever your enrollment was and your student credit hours 2 years ago. So if our enrollment went up wildly in the fall, that won't change the state allocation until fiscal year 26. So we do plan on all of those things. We have been planning for the deficit that would come in state allocation because we know what it's going to be approximately. I say approximately because things like the $2,000 state employee salary increase can either create a cost or it can create a little bit of a surplus depending on how the state times awarding universities. So we really don't have final numbers until after July 1st, but we have to do all of that forecasting. The $66 million cut may end up being another $2 million cut to the University of West Georgia. It may not. I don't have any scenario where it would be higher than that. However, it is something that we have to prepare for. So we are going to run scenarios on that, but we're not going to take action until I know more from the Board of Regents and understand whether or not we're going to have to weather that and to what degree. Now that's offset by the third thing that I'll talk about, that's growth initiatives. Growth initiatives are the key thing that we have to be focused on. And I'm going to say that very plainly. Growth initiatives are the key thing we have to be focused on. They can come in a multitude of different forms. But we have not counted on or figured in growth initiatives to fiscal year 24 in the budget plan. So I see very strong positive indicators across enrollment, across graduate enrollment, across undergraduate. Those indicators are powerful, but they don't actually mean anything until we get to census in October. However, right about August, people start showing up. We from a budget perspective, we do have a much better sense of where we're at. We still don't make decisions on that because of the same thing that happened to the University of West Georgia in 2019. If you'll recall, the budget was built on a projection for a certain number, but the university lost a large number of students that didn't return, about 800 students that fall. But bear in mind, we've changed all of the processes and procedures to help students and support students, take away a lot of needless obstacles and barriers. So our drop rates are, just substantially lower than they were there, not even in the realm of what you would see in 2019. And our retention rates are way up, both in terms of fall retention, which is the federal number that we'll book, but fall to spring, which is the key number for the University of West Georgia because we traditionally lost about 10% of our student body in that transition. All of those things being said, cuts at the state level can be mitigated with growth initiatives at the local level. So when we focus in on high demand academic programs, a type of student experience that attracts more and more students, leaning into reaching out to populations of students that are unfamiliar with the University of West Georgia. Dr. Preston and I just left a meeting where we were over at West Commons in Z6, and there were 100 students from the Carroll County schools out of Villa Rica enjoying this campus all day. Now that matters. It might not feel like it matters, but 5 years from now and 10 years from now or 2 years from now, when students are making a decision about where they go, if they've had experiences here and they've had positive experiences with people, it makes all the difference in the world. And that includes the growth that we get out of graduate students. Because most of the graduate students that we see matriculate through the University of West Georgia have had a touch or have been students at the University of West Georgia before. Those are all growth initiatives. We're going to have to be focused on creative and innovative growth initiatives for years to come. And that includes for this coming fall, because my hope is that we're going to see a number of things that we've been investing in for the last couple of years come to fruition this fall, and we start to see some more positive indicators instead of just sitting here talking about national losses. I saw a thing from a higher education kind of thinker and consultant yesterday. It said an economist, a demographer, and an educator walk into a bar, fill in the punchline. I went, oh, that's funny, except you don't work for a university. We are the ones who get to change what our trajectory is in growth initiatives in creative ways. And it doesn't just mean registered students. Sometimes it will mean reaching out to Amazon, signing a contract with Amazon so we become their education provider. We get a contract rate with them, working with other companies, school districts, government entities to create value for them, right? And we have a lot of intellectual capital that can be leveraged to create value for others, right? It's not unlike when we fire up the Anaconda kiln and bring in, hundreds of people from different communities to come and experience a value creation that exists at the University of West Georgia. It's a small thing, but you notice how 2,000 pieces that we pull out of that every year. Students go and sell those. That creates revenue, right? Now it creates revenue for them as student artists, but there's a draw in there for the university as well. We've got to think about creative and innovative ways to create value for others moving into the 21st century. So I emphasize that today. I'm going to emphasize it every day with anybody, knowing that that's going to be one of the cruxes of our economy as we go forward. With that, I'll finish my remarks. Take any question you may have, unless you'd like Dr. Preston to go first. How do you want to handle this, Jim?
Yeah, that's fine. Let's have you both go and then we'll have questions. Yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think a lot of my comments are going to continue on the president's remarks, some fiscal, but then also looking forward into the future. And I'll start with asking those of you who have worked with honor students, and you know who you are either online or in the room, to pause for a moment and congratulate yourselves. Take a moment to honor that work, pun intended. Right? We had the good fortune of participating in honors convocation last week, and over 100 students across that stage. We were able to recognize each one of them by name and the work that they did. So I commend all of our faculty, and in particular today, I want to pause and congratulate and thank and honor the honors faculty and those faculty that have enabled that across the institution. And I want to start there because it typifies the unique experience, whether it's in the creative arts or in science. We had a fantastic material sciences lab open house week and a half ago, where we had community members and prospective students touring. I think we've already got 2 students that are interested in that program that combines chemistry and physics in unique ways to really address modern expectations of those fields. And I point out honors and that material sciences lab because it's not doing the same thing that we have been doing. The great thing about higher education is that we recognize that things are constantly changing. And although we preserve tradition, we also are looking forward to what's next and what do we need to build and be on the vanguard and be on the cutting edge. Because if we're not doing it, then another institution in the area or another state and folks are going to gravitate to that. So the president talks about lead indicators and growth initiatives being unique, being distinctive, and providing these kinds of experiences for students is at the heart of that. 2 examples I'll give in innovative ways of bringing in revenue to kind of offset these cuts are in continuing education. Right, Marty's doing continuing those summer camps, those academic summer camps that we started last summer. Had a great first run of that, nearly 100 students, but we're on track to have 150 students this summer. And all of those academic summer camps are led by our faculty and staff at UWG. Right, we're not outsourcing those camps, although we still have some of those offerings, But this is a way where we can take the expertise of our faculty and offer that up in summer to not only help with salary revenue that's going to come into the faculty and staff that are leading that, but it also gets these middle school students, some high school students who might not have ever been on campus before, and explore areas of creativity, science, entrepreneurship, and really solidify that, yes, I want to study this, and I want to study this at UWG. So tremendous growth there. On the flip end of that, continuing education, Marty's projecting about a 50% revenue growth year over year between FY22 and FY23. Many of our faculty are also leading some of those classes. So we've got students before they arrive and they're introduced to UWG, and then they're going to come here as undergraduate and graduate students. And then we're interested in lifelong learning, coming back for courses and certificates through continuing education. And it's just showing that we can serve all of these different constituencies incredibly well. So in the context of that, yes, we do have some belt tightening this upcoming fiscal year, because due to that 2-year lag, even though we're growing in certain areas, we still have to contend with 2 years ago, we had enrollment and credit hour decline. And all the lead indicators are pointing at both the undergraduate and the graduate, where we're headed in a different direction going forward. But we do have about $1 million across academic affairs and operating budgets that we will need to reduce in this upcoming fiscal year. That's never fun, but I've been meeting with each of the deans and they'll be operating that, operationalizing that across. I'll say that this is operating dollars, so it's in things that we're buying, and we've got some efficiencies in ITS, and collectively, I think we've got dozens, if not some, 100 computers in boxes that have been bought or that were on desks from new locations, people switching to a new position, either internally or externally, that we can reuse to not buy new and make efficient use of what we've already got. But then also adjusting, I'm deeply committed to, and the deans are also committed to professional development, adjusting that and making sure that we're investing those well. But the question, and I appreciate, Jeff, you bringing this forward earlier this week, we are not impacting any P&T actions and the salary adjustments for those that did all of that great work and achieved these milestones in their careers. So that will not be impacted at all. Focusing on the operating expenses, the equipment, not in personnel. So looking forward, we've got in the new degrees that have already been approved by the USG Board of Regents, we've got a projected 1,000 new students that would be coming to West Georgia in these new master's and undergraduate and Nexus degrees that have already been approved. Happy to say we've got a Nexus in the esports management on the docket next week. So that's yet another degree that we'll be adding, and that's all of these Nexus degrees that we put forward are fully embedded into existing bachelor's programs. So it's just an entree for people to get to West Georgia. And then the other question that came up, and I appreciate you sharing it with me, is this, the PAFR dollars that the president mentioned. These are different types of monies. So it's not that we can take that and use it to preserve other things that we'd like to do. That was a specific allocation that was made for that renovation. As much as we'd like to maybe be more fluid in how we're spending those dollars, that's a great win for UWG. And very glad that we've got the support of everyone that is investing in that. But please know that those are different flavored dollars. We need to dedicate them to that. Last thing I'll talk about is kind of finishing off with the unique, distinct experiences that students get at West Georgia, and talk about an event that I was fortunate to attend on Tuesday night with our Bluecoats. These are fantastic ambassadors. They attend and represent the university so well at various events. We talked about the focus on internships, externships, and experiential learning. And this was really a microcosm of the broader expectation that we want for every single student. So I'm not going to miss an opportunity. Anytime I'm talking with you, I'm going to talk about our QEP and that point of distinction that when you come to West Georgia, you get more than you get elsewhere. You're going to get creative arts, you're going to get performing arts, you're going to get hands-on lab experiences in material sciences in every one of our degrees in a dozen different ways in every one of our academic programs. You're going to have an opportunity to have a unique experiential, whether it's lab or whatever you're doing. And the question has come up of, how do we inventory these? And I know we've got a group of faculty working on this, so it's not a single solution. There's not going to be one form and you check that box and you say, this is a QEP course. But each one of our academic programs can pull that off in unique ways and have internships, clinical experiences. So in the Blue Coat meeting on Tuesday, we really leaned into that and talking about launching your career before graduation. And we there was a question that was asked, the difference between teaching and mentorship. And I appreciate that our faculty do both of those things. Teaching, as the answer went, was what we're doing in the class, that's content focused. But that mentorship goes way beyond just what's in the course and what's in the textbook or what's in videos. That our faculty are connecting our students and mentoring them in their careers and providing and opening doors and creating introductions for them based on your network of professionals that you know. And I bet, just like we paused for a moment to recognize those faculty that are engaged in honors and creating unique experiences, that we can pause for just a moment now, and each one of you can think of many students that you've done that for and help them get their first job, launch their career. And I hope that they're still connected to you and they recognize and are sending you thank you notes periodically as you celebrate their successes. We're going to continue to do that as an institution, and the QEP is just one way that we're going to be leaning into that, not just in this year, but in the next decade. With that said, we'll take any question on anything you got. Anything
I appreciate you addressing the questions, or maybe follow-up questions to those, if anyone has those, or any new questions on any topic.
Yes.
This is a question for both the president and the provost.
I'm going to come over here.
So let me preface this by saying that, Mr. President, you mentioned the sum of roughly $2 million, and that might be offset by growth in the fall of 2023. But as planners, one often says, what if there is a worst case scenario? So we take the $2 million and eyeball the numbers for how many full-time employees that might be. And by my estimate, that turns out to be roughly 25 employees worth $2 million. So you can readily understand, and that's an upper limit on the number of losses, but as a planner or as a person who worries, one might think about those 25 potential, and I say employees because that might include both faculty and staff lines. So can you please address how should the faculty members who might naturally experience some level of anxiety that in the past couple of years, we have lost a number of positions. Are we going to lose more positions? Although you have pointed out optimistically that that may not happen, that the loss might be offset, but still, can you please address the natural anxiety that some of us might feel? Thank you.
It's a great question, and I hope that question was well articulated online. I anticipate that it was. So, one, we have a lot of institutions in distress throughout the state of Georgia, for sure. I mean, 20 out of 26 institutions have experienced significant enrollment losses, and that might be 22. But I'll use the term significant. I'm confident in 20. And we did too. We did in 2020. We made a lot of really tough decisions and structural changes right there. And the reason why that's so important is that a lot of institutions at that time didn't. They made a lot of temporary measures to take those same losses. Well, after that was over, about 4 or 5 months after it was over, I sat in a meeting with a bunch of other leaders of institutions, and the question came up, when is that money going to be restored? The person who asked wasn't laughing. But everybody who's worked at multiple institutions in multiple states was, because the answer is never. That's not the way the legislature works. It's not the way boards work. Your budget is your budget. And the scope of that budget is aligned to the scope of the institution. So in each of the last fiscal years, we have been structurally adapting to our resources. Instead of, and for those of you who went through 2008, you'll probably recall, the whole country did the same thing at universities. They just kind of waited. They trimmed as much as they could. So like, we didn't have parking. We'll just park at the grocery store down the street. We'll all walk in. They cut every cost they could. They didn't make any structural changes. Waiting for all that money to come back. It never came back. So that creates a lot of institutions that kind of slug along until they can figure it out. We invested, while we were making these tough structural changes that decrease our cost, we're also making investments in growth initiatives that would give us a brighter future. Next year is going to be this nexus point. And my hope is it goes just like this. State allocation feels like this, but those growth initiatives start paying off. So we feel some evenness, but even in the best case scenario, it's going to be a tight year, a tighter year than we've experienced in the past. But by doing it that way, when those growth initiatives pay off and the state allocation matches up, we've all of a sudden preserved the ability for this university to become more complex and sophisticated for a decade, right? And it's at those inflection points, it's at really tough times that if we don't make those decisions, then we would have to fulfill the anxiety that you're talking about now. We are not in an emergency situation. We've been planning on this situation. Do not care for the $66 million cut from the legislature. That's not, ideal. But we are not in an emergency situation because we have been doing really hard work. And yet we have fewer people than we did 3 years ago. There's no question. But I have sat with thousands of students who do not feel like they are getting less of an experience at UWG. In fact, I would argue you have a lot of students who are feeling like they're getting a really rich experience. Last week with all of you in material science demo, if you want to go and see a really fantastic group of students who are kind of having their faculty mentors, not faculty teachers, because I think it changes once you get in the lab. Walk alongside them. Material science labs was just remarkable, fantastic. So we haven't compromised the product that we provide, the UWG experience, at the same time that we've taken really tough financial hits. And now we're kind of poising ourselves through lots of growth initiatives, some of which come along with some risk, some of which are much safer, to be able to make smart investments when the ship comes in a little more robustly. Now let me address the anxiety. Because financially, we've been able to, I'll go back and say, UWG's been running on a forward economy for a long time. Okay. We've been posting up all of these positions. A lot of them have been vacant. Many of you are familiar with that. So there's been money in vacant positions that's not actually invested in personnel. And then that money gets spent at the end of the year. You remember that? Everybody goes and spends money like drunk sailors, because I've never seen end of year money in the amounts that I saw the first year. I've never seen that. It is not the right way to do business. And I say that because you end up never truing up your budget. You end up paying for the next year with the past year, and then you're just going to be in the same position later. It's passing it from one credit card to another, just with a different type of interest. We are correcting that right now at the same time that we're taking that hit. So we end up being in a position where we have a much more sustainable economy. I don't foresee in these scenarios mass reductions. We are going to have to make some tough choices in key areas. My hope is, just like in 2020, we'll be able to mitigate some of those right away, right? So you say, gosh, this position no longer makes sense for the university. These vacancies no longer make sense for the university. We're going to make sure that we take those off the table. But it's really we're in a position where I think we're in a short position. I think it's one tight year followed by a less tight year followed by I don't want to use the term normalized. I don't know what normal is anymore, but a year where we are spending more time investing than we are managing decline. So there is not rest assured, that doesn't mean that there won't be belt tightening that very pointed areas that are areas not of growth, but of decline, where we have to make choices. But that's the 2 million, 25 positions, that's not on the table. And Dr. Preston, you can correct me, you have different ideas on this, but I mean, the way in which we've been planning is we have to preserve essential components. And I know when we talk about a university, everything's an essential component. But we have to make choices around what's going to be an essential component for the state of Georgia for the student experience in this period of time, since we don't get to control the state allocation fees, right? In other states, for instance, I don't mind Georgia. I hate this 2-year lag. In the same moment, it could be worse. Because in other states, they inform you about this time what your state allocation is going to be, except in South Carolina, because it was always 0. And that's why the price of tuition in that state is so high, and why you're seeing the number of students who may or may not be seeing billboards about go west, go affordable in South Carolina, matriculating into West Georgia in the coming year, which I'm excited about because everybody should come to Georgia, especially Carrollton for college. Does that answer that question?
Thank you.
No, it doesn't give you every detail. I don't have every detail, but that is not the approach. If, however, and we have a lot of institutions that are in this situation, you didn't make structural changes, you have no choice but to do exactly what you described. You have no choice. There isn't enough money to take those cuts unless you do exactly what you described. I'm glad we're not in that position. Going to Rob.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Preston, I think that my question is for you, because you had mentioned that P&T would not be affected by budget cuts. And I have several my colleagues who asked me to come and ask about this, because they're very concerned if they put a considerable amount of work and time into putting together dossiers, especially if they don't have to go up for promotion, like from associate to full in any given year. What should they expect, or what would you advise them to do? Should they expect that they will get their adjustment to the next level? And is that an adjustment that is on top of the COLA adjustment that Kemp has given recently or approved recently? So ultimately, what would you advise people to do, and what should they expect for this coming year?
The information is being disseminated to the deans in the next few weeks. So they'll be receiving those notifications. I'll say, expect to celebrate. Right?
Expect to celebrate?
Expect to celebrate.
Okay.
Not only because you've achieved that goal, but also, we talk about cuts and starting with operating, right? Not impacting personnel. So when I say that P&T will not be negatively impacted by the adjusted budgets, we need to start by rewarding success and great work. Milestones, promotion, and tenure are those things that we should celebrate first. Those are in the academy very important things. And so we need to preserve that and lean into that and celebrate people who accomplish these. I'm going to answer the question about will COLA impact and say yes and no, like a good professor would, right? And hopefully I've got your attention now, because the COLA last year was applied retroactively. So the interpretation was that those were already dollars. Let's roll the clock back. And so when we did the P&T and the Coupa analysis, it was reasonable to include that COLA because it was given backdated essentially. Going forward, if you were going up for P&T this cycle, you earned that 5K COLA last year. So I say yes to the answer because that 5K is baked into your salary and therefore is part of that Coupa analysis going forward. For the 2K that is pending and we're hopeful and expect will be realized, that is in the future. So that 2K will not be calculated into anyone's Coupa analysis.
Okay.
For PNT purposes.
Okay.
I apologize if that was confusing, but it was,
No.
I mean, very intentional in the wording because there's really two COLA adjustments to be considered for anyone in this cycle. One will not count at all. The other has already been accounted for because they've been earning its salary for now, including the retroactive, almost 2 years.
Although I would say, unless the state tells us that the 2,000 is going to be retroactive, in which case the same scenario will apply.
Makes sense. Okay.
Thank
But so in terms of what to relay back, in terms of other than a celebration, which I think we're all looking forward to, they should expect those raises to come through to make up that difference. And do you know if the deans would know that before folks have to decide whether they go up?
For next year?
PNT and promotion would be a little bit different because I think we've been talking mostly about PNT, but I think a lot of the folks who asked we're just mostly concerned about promotion from associate to full.
Right. I'm going to answer that more broadly and say that when you have achieved the outcomes associated with those promotions and the tenure, you should go up. Right? And I say that because I know historically at various institutions this has been handled differently. But the idea that you're going to achieve that and you were in a lean budget year and therefore missed out on the appropriate compensation adjustment, that is not the intent going forward. And certainly, and I say that because we've also done the analysis, the financial equity analysis, and the goal is to move off of that 88% Coupa. And we've said this publicly before.
I said it last time.
Yes. The goal is 100% of Coupa.
Yeah.
And so if you went up historically and there's now a larger gap, then the intent would be to correct that. But go up for promotion, go up for tenure. I mean, these are titles, these are honors. If you have hit those outcomes, the approach at West Georgia is not tough luck. You went up the wrong year. That creates inequity and all kinds of problems well beyond just the individual. That creates a culture that is not one worthy of this institution and not worthy of the faculty and the staff at this institution.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Okay, I have a question about the study abroad. President Provost, we have talked about this several times. Is there any update about the salaries, summer salaries for faculty who's engaged in study abroad?
So thank you for the question. For those online, the question was about Ed Abroad and the compensation for faculty, knowing that education abroad cohorts are often smaller than the prorated salaries and enrollment requirements for an on-campus, online, non-Ed Abroad. So appreciate the analysis that Dr. Gaker, Dr. Akins did in presenting all of the programs for this upcoming summer. I'll say that by the analysis, they are, if you look at the tuition dollars and the expenses, if we were to pay at 10%, then the institution is net negative $40,000 on that. I say that because you can look at many academic programs and come up with whether they're net positive, net negative. We make a determination broadly about what is the value of this. I think education abroad and that opportunity for our students, connecting back to the QEP and experiential opportunities, goes beyond just dollars and cents. And so I would have been hopeful for that announcement to be passed on to you because you had the query, but I'll answer it here.
Yeah.
Apologies, you should have received it earlier this week.
Yep.
But we are fully funding that 10% for education abroad for this year, and then reassessing with a commitment to continue to do so as much as possible. Knowing that that is an important element of the institutional identity. And there is more work that goes into an education abroad than just teaching during that time period when you are with those students.
Thank you very much.
So the $1 million cut that we will experience, that's not part of the $66 million or the $2 million cut that UWG would have as part of the 66 million, right? I just want to
That is correct.
get that straight.
The million in operating and academic affairs is a result of declines 2 years ago that we have reduced budget from the state allocation portion because of the 2-year lag.
And then is it correct to say that CAXI is going to have a 50% cut in operating, the UC 30, and then part-time 10%?
The specific numbers have been given to the deans. I don't know the percentages in my head, but it is matched relative to credit hour and enrollment declines in those spaces.
And in the past, when we have had budget cuts, we mentioned 2008, we always talked about the reserve. What's the state of the reserve?
There is no, that's a funny term. You talked about that because what you were talking about was that forward account. We are legally only allowed to keep a pretty modest reserve per year, and that is for things like boiler going out, which happens.
Yeah.
When the boiler goes out, I'll give you, it's like $250,000 to fix a 300-ton boiler. I'm not even talking about purchasing one. So we don't, there are other institutions that have some carry forward pockets like that. The reserve we have is really an emergency reserve. And even then, next year, that's going to be the minimum. We're going to meet the floor for that, not the ceiling. Simply because otherwise, if we keep the more robust reserve, then that, all of those cuts have to be bigger. And so we're taking that kind of centrally and hitting our floor. We'll get back to what we really want to be at is a sustainable economy where we have an organization that has this much demand and we invest 2% less than that into that demand, and that 2% becomes investments for the future of the reserve. But we're going to have to go through a correction. That correction will take at least the next 12 months. I suspect it will be fiscal year 24, and then hopefully we'll be able to do it in a way in fiscal year 25 where nobody feels it, but it is happening.
Thank you. Any other questions as we wrap up the administrator portion online?
There's the request to repeat the summer salary for stuff.
Yes. So the faculty that are leading those ed abroad programs will be fully funded at 10% of their salary for their work for that education abroad. Did that come through that time? Great. Again, coupled with and honoring the work that they do well before and also following up on those experiences for students.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just to follow up on that from the perspective of the Senate Chair, first of all, I appreciate President and Provost talking to me and including the Senate in the way they have in this meeting to let us know details about what's coming and how they're planning and preparing for that. I will mention 3 things that I said our faculty will be concerned about, some of which have been mentioned already, but I want to mention them because they provide context for what we'll be doing going forward as a Senate, especially in the coming year. The first was faculty will be nervous about loss of lines. That's always our nervous reaction. We all have some PTSD around that. So I appreciate you speaking specifically to that and helping resolve some of those anxieties. The second thing I mentioned was if the faculty see increase in administrative positions, we're going to get very nervous. I think it's that fair to say that sometimes makes faculty go, how is that possible when we're cutting lines? And I just want to mention as one example that I appreciated, and I've said this to the President and Provost, that when Dr. Drake took an interim position or is taking an interim position, not only do we get to rub shoulders with Dr. Duke more, but when she did that, Should we actually applaud that? Dr. Newton, you get the applause. When she did that, the administration sent an email saying, we're gonna cover that. We're gonna cover that space rather than, I think sometimes we get nervous, like in the interim will get appointed and then the interim becomes maybe permanent and then there's an added. So I just really appreciated seeing that willingness to cover those duties and make sure there's no falling through of any business, but also that we don't see as faculty a potentially new administrative position that makes us nervous in the middle of some budget cuts. The other thing, and this is the important one for our work in the summer and into the next year as a Senate, is workload increase. I told both the president and provost that with cuts inevitably comes more work on the backs of faculty and staff to manage load. And even things like growth initiatives, which we all value, or honors college students being supervised, is on the backs of faculty. So we're going to be in conversation, meaning myself, administration, our executive committee, and then I think in the fall, it'll be a focus for the entire Senate to really take on the question of workload under the circumstances we're in now, but also looking ahead so we can be effective, we can feel less overworked, we can manage some of the feelings of morale impact, disengagement that some people experience, well, a lot of us experience. And so even in the Senate itself, I think the workload of the Senate, people find taxing. They sometimes find it to be a chore rather than meaningful and purposeful work, which I very much want to work to resolve. So over the coming really year, from now until probably this time next year, the Senate will be working on workload, teaching, service, research and scholarly and creative endeavors, all of that looking at it holistically so we understand how they are affecting each other, affecting the quality of our service to students, but also our sense of value and purpose in our work. I just think it's high time we address that. As one of our executive committee members said, this one I like, he calculated his service load, his teaching load, and his research and scholarly workload, and it was 300%. So I do believe we are defying math as a university, and our faculty are doing more than 100%. I know we are, without question. So it's time to get innovative and creative and really thoughtful and careful about how the Senate addresses workload. We've just got to get this in such a way that we feel valued, but also feel like we're effective in producing results for things like growth and for managing our students' needs, because I love supervising honor students. I've got one right now who just gave a presentation at our SPARC, our Student Psychology Annual Research Conference yesterday. She blew me away, with her presentation. So I want to keep doing that. And I want to be able to do that while managing all the other load. And I know you do too. So that's going to be a focus for the Senate in the coming year. Okay, with that, we're going to ask if there are any reports from the committee chairs, just general information reports before we get to your specific business.
Is this when you wanted me to mention what I was doing, or is that?
I think you're on the agenda for later. Is that right? You get a special agenda section just for you. So anyways, I just went out on me. Oh, I got it. Okay. So now we'll turn the time over to Kim Green, undergraduate academic program.
8 items that will be covered in 6 votes. The first, we have 2 program revision proposals from English for 2 program tracks. They'll both be voted on as a block because the rationale for revising both tracks is the same. So this will apply to the accelerated bachelor's to master's in English education track and secondary education track. The proposal is removing 3 education courses, education 2110, 2120, and 2130 from the major requirements for the degree. The Board of Regents no longer requires these courses, and our College of Education has stated that the courses are now optional. We've approved similar changes from other programs this year. Are there any questions about these? Then we'll vote for that. All in favor? Any opposed? Or any abstaining? Passes. Next, we have two proposals from the biology Bachelor of Science program tracks. We'll vote on those together. Here too, the rationale for revising both of these is the same. And this will be for the general biology track and professional preparation track. There are two changes proposed. First, biology 4984, the senior biology seminar, is being stated as a required course for majors in both the list of courses and the curriculum schema. Second, the statement of elective hours. So the biology 3,000, 4,000 elective hours are being increased from the 0 to 20 hours, being increased to a 0 to 29 credit hours range. And the general electives, 3,000, 4,000, are reduced from a 0 to 18 range to a 0 to 9 credit hour range, with the effect being to require more biology electives and fewer general electives. Any questions about these changes? Biology? Vote all in favor, Luce? And Joe? Any opposed? Or any abstaining? Thanks. That passes, thank you. And now we have three proposals to vote on these each separately from the School of Communications, Film, and Media. First is a request for a new course, Communications 1121 Experiential Learning Lab. This class allows students to earn credit for participating in the school's multiple experiential learning labs, such as Wolf Radio or WTV, among several others. Students can participate as trainees, volunteers, or paid staff. It's a variable credit hour course and it's repeatable for up to 6 hours. Any questions about this new course?
It's variable credit. I thought it was, what I read was 0 credit, but is it 0 to?
I understood it was, they could take it for like 1 to 2 hours at a time, and it was repeatable up to 6 hours. It is a credit hour.
But it's satisfactory, unsatisfactory, right? Grading?
Yes, I think that's what it says in the description.
Okay, which is usually 0 credit.
It is pass-fail variable credit, but also pass-fail.
Courses can be pass, fail. Anyone have any experience without pass, fail courses that credit vary?
Yeah.
So,
History. That would be graduate though. That's right.
I mean, I've experienced satisfactory, unsatisfactory courses that you get an S or a U in that are 0 credit, but I have not experienced pass fail. That's why I was asking for variable credit. How many, I don't remember, how many credit hours can they?
it's repeatable for up to 6. I was under the, I thought it stated that they could take each one for about 2 hours, 1 to 2 hours each time they took it, depending on how many hours they were working in the
So it's a
lab.
practical.
We'll use the SU for credits common for things like internships. Just kind of sounds like it.
It's like a practicum course, it sounds like.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's built for the new QEP. And the difference between the credit hours are, there will be a version that's 8 weeks, like our short courses, and a version that is 15 weeks. The 15 weeks will be more intensive and therefore have the higher credit. I'm unaware if there's precedent on whether pass fail doesn't happen with credit hours. I can, Jill or she can look it up, I suppose.
It does. You can have, all independent study forms, for example, can be credit bearing and can be S or D. It is an option for multiple courses to do it in that form if you want. There is precedent.
Satisfactory and unsatisfactory. Is that okay? Any other questions? Everybody for the input, we'll vote on that then. All in favor of this communications course? Okay. Any opposed? Or opposed? Or any abstaining?
Somehow Farouk is both in favor and opposed.
Quantum physics.
Schrodinger's cat, yes.
Next, we have another new course. This is Communications 4221, Health Communications Campaigns. The content of a current course, Communications 4220, is being split into two separate courses to support the new Health Communication Certificate, which is coming up next. This new course, 4221, will focus on media and campaigns. Just as information, the existing course is going to modify its focus to the interpersonal aspects of health communications and patient-provider interactions, but that revision doesn't require Senate action. What we're voting on today will be the addition, this creation of this new course, Communications 4221. Any questions about this? Then all in favor of creating this new course? Any opposed? Or any abstaining? That one passes. Thank you. Next is the addition of a new certificate, Health Communication Certificate. It's a 12-hour certificate that will focus on communication in the healthcare context, and students will learn how various factors, demographics, personality, communication styles, cultural background, and so on, impact patient-provider interactions and public health messaging. So the certificate can be useful specifically for future healthcare providers or students preparing to work in public health, but also more generally for students to be prepared to be engaged patients who communicate about their own healthcare. So it has those general and specific possibilities for student interest. Any questions about this? Okay, then all in favor for that one? And any opposed? Or any abstaining? That passes. And our last vote is for a new course for the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies, XIDS 2300, Connecting with Youth from High-Risk Settings. This course covers the models and processes for connecting educators, students, and knowledge in ways that build relationships in high-risk settings to support their learning and engagement. The foundation disciplines for this course, this is interdisciplinary, are psychology, philosophy, and sociology. Any questions about this week? This one, all in favor? This one first. Any opposed? Or any abstaining? All right. Through that one. We have then just a few information items. The first three information items on the agenda report that UPC approved list of courses for certain purposes, which I'll mention. All of these approvals are based on criteria that the Senate had approved in past meetings. So first, we approved 16 additional courses to receive the undergraduate research high impact practice designation. The list of those courses attached to the agenda. This brings the total to 67 courses that now have this undergraduate research designation. That started back in spring of 22 when we started applying this designation. Secondly, we approved 60 courses to receive the work-based learning high impact practice designation. This will be the first list through for those courses. And while work-based learning, this focus does align with the QEP, these designations would exist even if QEP didn't. The process can stand separate from the QEP. Third, we approved the XIDS 2002 what were called first year seminar, now called cornerstone courses for the upcoming fall or upcoming year. There were 40 something of those courses. It's down a bit from prior years, but we're told that they can handle the incoming student demand and maybe for free. And then lastly, since no other volunteers still next year, unless somebody comes up.
Actually, in our executive committee, I tried to nominate Kim for 3 other chair positions. So, she declined. That's appropriate. Patrick? By the way, I think one of our members has brought brownies and cookies. Am I right to say?
Yeah, you can have it.
Did they make their way? Sorry, online folks, but are they being distributed? Are they?
They can
Okay,
be
help
best
yourselves. Go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you. Good afternoon. GPC today has 5 program proposals and 10 course proposals that we will handle in 9 votes. Our first proposal was from the College of Arts, Culture, and Scientific Inquiry, Department of Anthropology, Psychology, and Sociology. GPC approved a request to revise the Psychology MA program. An earlier proposal to remove the GRE requirement was approved by the Faculty Senate. However, at that time, the letter of recommendation requirement also was inadvertently removed. The need for 3 letters of recommendation has been added to the admission requirements. Are there any questions or discussion about this proposal? If not, let's launch the online poll. All in favor of the proposal to revise the Psychology MA program, please raise your hand. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The proposal passes. The next set of proposals is from the College of Education, Department of Counseling, Higher Education, and Speech Language Pathology. In a block vote, GPC approved a proposal to add 7 new courses in speech language pathology, followed by a vote to approve a new speech language pathology post-baccalaureate certificate program. The 7 courses each would be required as part of the proposed post-baccalaureate speech language pathology certificate program. The proposal for a postgraduate certificate in speech language pathology responds to a growing demand for speech language pathologists in the U.S. Employment of speech language pathologists is projected to grow 21% from 2021 to 2031, much faster than the average for all occupations. Students who do not have an undergraduate degree in speech language pathology have few options to gain the necessary prerequisite courses to effectively and efficiently apply to graduate programs. The 7 proposed new courses that would be required in the SLP post-baccalaureate program and which were approved by GPC are SLPA 5701, Introduction to Communication Sciences and Disorders, SLPA 5702, Speech and Language Acquisition and Disorders, SLPA 5703, Phonetics, SLPA 5704, Anatomy and Physiology of Speech and Hearing, SLPA 5705, Speech and Hearing Science, SLPA 5706, Introduction to Audiology, SLPA 5707, Introduction to Neurological Disorders. GPC approved these 7 courses through a block vote. Are there any questions or discussion on these courses?
And it should be SLPA.
SLPA. I was saying,
I can correct that. It is.
thank you very much. Sorry about that.
And I included them in the vote as a block. Yes, you did.
As a block. All right. Thank you. All in favor of the proposal to add S.
SLPA.
Oh, SLP. Okay, I thought okay. All in favor of the proposal to add SLPA 5701 through SLPA 5707, please raise your hand. Thank you. All opposed? Thank you. Any abstentions?
Okay, that proposal passes. Next, GPC voted to approve the proposal for the new speech language pathology post-baccalaureate certificate program based on the courses SLPA 5701 to 5707 as described earlier. Are there any questions or discussion on the proposed new speech language pathology post-baccalaureate certificate program before we vote?
I mean, this is a highly regarded master's degree program. And I've been able to have had the good fortune of working with many of the master's degree program and the students in that program. And they're high quality, high academic achieving students in that master's degree program. So how is it anticipated that this post-baccalaureate certificate will potentially impact their master's program enrollment? And within a school setting, will it change their certification so that this is more of a speech language pathology assistance? You know, it's not the same as having a full master's degree. I don't understand the career implications nor how the projected impacts on that master's degree program enrollment.
Dr. Matthews?
Yes, hello, I'm joining everyone online. So the post-baccalaureate program is designed to allow students who don't have their undergraduate degree to apply to graduate programs. So it just allows a greater pool of students to be eligible to apply. It doesn't mean that those students are guaranteed acceptance in any way. And we don't see any way that it would impact our master's level students in terms of enrollment, the number of students that we accept. And to the second part of the question, these students will not be eligible as of the proposal as is proposed today to serve as SLP assistants. This only allows them the opportunity to apply to graduate programs.
Okay. Thank you. That answers my question. So in effect, it's a bridge for these students to apply for the master's degree program if they don't have a bachelor's.
Yes, and so a lot of our applicants are already in this category. They are students who didn't have so that's the number one question I get all the time. If I don't have a degree in speech language pathology, how do I get into grad school? And for the, however many years we've had to say, okay, UGA has a post-baccalaureate program, or you can do an online program somewhere else. You have to sort of Google and find your own post-baccalaureate program. And so this will allow us to capture a lot of the students who want to attend our graduate program to first have the opportunity to come through our post-baccalaureate certificate.
Super. Thank you so much. It's really helpful.
Welcome.
Thanks, Dr. Matthews. Any other questions? Hearing none. Let's launch the poll for those online. All in favor of the proposal, adding the speech language pathology post-baccalaureate certificate program, please raise your hand. Thank you. All opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. The proposal passes. Next, GPC approved a proposal from the Department of Early Childhood through Secondary Education and approved a proposal for a new course. The new course, SEED 6270, Technology in the Math and Science class. This course has been taught during the fall of 2021 and fall of 2022 under the SEED 6285 Special Topics course designation. The course has proven to be beneficial and popular with students and appropriately needs its own course number as part of the curriculum. Are there any questions or discussions about this proposal? Hearing none, let's launch the online poll. All those in favor of the proposal to add SEED 6270 Technology in the Math and Science class, please raise your hand. Thank you. Those opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. The proposal passes. Next, GPC approved a proposal in the Department of Educational Technology and Foundations to revise the Instructional Technology Non-Degree Program. Part 1 involves removal of the non-degree school library media SLM option. The program has transitioned the non-degree SLM option existing within this program to a certificate program. The program wants to then remove the non-degree option so that all students can route through the certificate option. Second, program of study changes. Currently, the program's instructional technology certification classes across degree programs are inconsistent. The program aligned to the new Georgia Professional Standards Commission instructional technology standards. It aligned the standards to the same courses across all degree programs. MEDT 7464, Designing Technology Enhanced Instruction, MEDT 7490, Visual and Media Literacy for Teaching and Learning, and MEDT, Assessing Learning and Technology Enhanced Instruction. For this reason, the program proposes changing the instructional technology certification program of the certification segment of the program to reflect these courses. The program would add an additional IT-focused core, which will include MEDT 7468, Instructional Multimedia Design and Development. The purpose of this change is to make the IT certification courses consistent across all degree programs. Are there any questions or is there any discussion about this proposal? If not, let's launch the online poll. All those in favor of the proposal to revise the instructional technology non-degree program, please raise your hand. Thank you. Those opposed? Those abstaining? The proposal passes. Thank you. GPC then approved a proposal from the Department of Leadership, Research, and School Improvement, revising the post-baccalaureate certificate in data analysis and evaluation methods. This certificate program was transferred from the previous College of Social Sciences to the College of Education and has an interdisciplinary focus. Therefore, the unit wants to revise the admission requirements to make the program more inclusive and attractive for all UWG students, as well as external applicants. Current admission criteria specify that graduate students in the College of Social Sciences would only submit the application form. The program wants to update its admission criteria to allow admitted UWG graduate students to pursue the certificate without submitting an application form. The program also wants to remove, for all applicants, the requirement of submitting 3 letters of recommendation to avoid the inherent delays in the application process. Are there any questions or discussion about this proposal? Not, let's launch the online poll. All those in favor of the proposal to revise the post-baccalaureate certificate in data analysis and evaluation methods, please raise your hand. Thank you. Those opposed? Any abstentions? Proposal passes. Next, GPC voted to approve individually the next 2 proposals from the Tanner Health System School of Nursing. First is a proposal to revise Nursing 6122, Health Systems Leadership Clinical Nurse Leader Practical 1. The program's accrediting body, the American Association of Colleges of Nursing, AACN, recently increased the required clinical hours for this degree to 500 hours. This proposal makes no change other than increasing the ratio of clinical hours to build in those additional clinical hours required by the accrediting agency. Are there any questions or discussion about this proposed revision? If
Not, let's launch the online poll. All those in favor of the proposal to revise nursing 6122, health systems leadership, clinical nurse 1, please raise your hand. Thank you. Those opposed? Any abstaining? The proposal passes. The next proposal is to revise nursing 6123, health systems leadership, clinical nurse leader practicum 2. This proposal is based on the same rationale as the previous one. Certification requirements increased minimum clinical hours to 500 total for the program. The only change was an increase in the ratio of clinical hours in the course from 4-to-1 ratio to a 5-to-1 ratio to incorporate this change. Are there any questions or discussion on this proposal? If not, let's launch the online poll. All those in favor of the proposal to revise nursing 6123, health systems leadership, clinical nurse leader practicum 2, please raise your hand. Thank you. Those opposed? Any abstentions? That proposal passes. Finally, GPC approved a proposal from University College, the Department of Civic Engagement and Public Service, to revise the Master of Public Administration MPA program. The program wants to modify 2 requirements in the current policy: GRE scores and the length of the personal statement. Many other MPA programs have already removed the GRE requirement, and this trend is expected to continue. By removing this requirement, the program can remain competitive. In particular, most MPA students have already been in service for several years after graduating from their undergraduate degrees. Requiring the GRE as part of the admission process may create an additional burden for these students when applying to the program. In addition, the program wants to remove the length requirement of 1,000 words. Removing the minimum length requirement allows applicants to tailor their statements to what they want to say, rather than trying to meet a specific length. It also allows for more flexibility in the application process, making it easier for applicants to apply. The quality of the personal statement is more important than the length. Are there any questions or discussion about this program proposal? If not, let's launch the online poll. All in favor of the proposal to revise the Master of Public Administration MPA program, please raise your hand. Thank you. Those opposed? Any abstentions? The proposal passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for a year of very productive and hard work. We're going to turn the time over to Dr. Khan for 2 items of business from the faculty development.
Good afternoon. During the past year, the Faculty Development Committee worked on changes to the faculty handbook. It is posted online. Specifically, Madam Secretary, please, if possible, pull up the PDF for the whole document. So the changes are highlighted in yellow, specifically pages 19, 27, and then a bunch of them, pages 30 through 40. Are there any questions? Would like to have a discussion on any item? Yes, sir.
So I think it's probably a typo, but I just thought I'd mention on page 186 of this agenda document, section 103.2, in red, one of the changes, I guess it's something we did previously, but it says may must in terms of departments developing guidelines.
Okay.
Yeah, everything.
Oh, right.
So like a consequential.
Yeah,
You'll just need to choose one of the words. Is it a may or a must?
yes.
Recall what the intention was of the FTC for that word?
I think it was May. So, would we accept a friendly amendment to strike out the must?
If we must.
That's good. Now you know what it's like to work with this executive committee. Is that, do we have a motion for a friendly amendment? So moved. Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so the vote will be for a friendly amendment to use the word may. Go ahead and. Good. So it'll be known as friendly amendment 1. All those in favor of using the word may, you would signify your approval. Putting online. Any opposed? And any abstentions?
Coming back to the revisions to the faculty handbook, is there further discussion? Madam Secretary, please launch the online poll. This is the only vote that my committee is having in the entire year. So all the folks in favor of approving the changes to the faculty handbook as listed in the agenda, please raise your hand. Thank you. Anyone opposed? Anyone both in favor and opposed at the same time? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you very much.
Do you have an information item?
May I go ahead and do it right now? Okay. There is a new workload policy which has started making its way in guidelines for workload at the program level in CATC. And the Faculty Development Committee was requested by the chair of the Senate to take a look at it. And so we went ahead and had a conversation. The conversation, if I might summarize very briefly, went like this, that these are tight budget times and a drop in student enrollment with a corresponding budget cut are both real. At the same time, we want to be invested in student success that oftentimes comes in the form of faculty-directed undergraduate research and scholarly and creative activities. It reminds many of us of a conversation that one might have at a kitchen table, which might go like this. There is inflation, the paycheck is unchanged, we have fixed payments for mortgage and car payment, we do not have a credit card. And so we have to tighten our belt and manage as best we can. So along these lines, the committee unanimously came up with a resolution that I do not remember in its entirety. And so I'm going to go ahead and read it out. Madam Secretary, there it is, but the committee wanted me to go ahead and read this out. So I'll go ahead and do that. So this is the proposed resolution on the new workload policy, which we'll affectionately call the 80-10-10 policy. Whereas the FTC recognizes the pressure of additional budget cuts and the need to creatively balance increased teaching responsibilities with professional development as well as service. However, the new workload policy has been issued without FTC input, a body that has over the last 2 years collaboratively vetted and implemented all new BOR policies on faculty evaluation and student success, which are tied directly to faculty workload. Whereas the new workload policy, 80% teaching, 10% service, 10% professional development, does not seamlessly follow from the faculty handbook's workload of 4 3-hour courses, section 127.01. No clause stipulates the assignment of 10% workload per course. Section 127.01 assesses course load per semester, not an annual basis. Definition of a course varies widely across units and disciplines depending on class size, contact versus credit hours, lecture versus lab or studio instruction, Thus, it is unclear how the 80-10-10 would be applied equitably across campus. And whereas the new workload policy does not take into account impact on student success as it curtails faculty time for research and creative endeavors, and thus faculty ability to direct student research, especially in the growing field of graduate education. And whereas the BOR policy requires noteworthy, within quotes, faculty achievements in more than the area of teaching, and the policy is listed, and it is quoted, minimum of all institutions in all professional ranks, thus limiting service and professional development to 10% each, conflicts with BOR policy. Noteworthy achievements in research, for example, it cannot feasibly be accomplished in 4 hours a week, which is roughly 10% of a 40-hour work. And I want to add to this that scholarly work would also include grant writing, which, as we all know, is time-consuming, which can bring additional resources to our campus at a time when budgets are really tight. Whereas the differentiation between teaching tracks, a 4-4 course load, and research tracks, a 3-3 course load, and the assignment has not been discussed or equitably applied across campus. Moreover, no differentiation regarding rank, tenure status, or clinical versus tenure track has been discussed. Therefore, resolved, and because we ran out of time and this is the last meeting of the Faculty Senate, this was a resolution. The FGC requests a pause to the implementation of the new workload policy and the creation of a collaborative and campus-wide consultation and vetting process closely involving faculty governance channels in order to safeguard equity across campus and to ensure that workload policies do not conflict with UWG's classification and mission as a comprehensive university. And this is really at the heart of the FDC's work this year, an increased emphasis on student success. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the opportunity to read, and this is my last meeting representing the good work of the Faculty Development Committee. I want to thank the Provost and the Assistant Provost for many conversations when we sought clarification from the BOR. I thank many faculty members and department chairs who provided important feedback to the Faculty Development Committee. And most of all, I want to thank the chair and the secretary of the Faculty Senate for a large number of very useful conversations and consultation about policy and how to go about bringing items to the Faculty Senate. I want to thank you all very much.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. Thank you for providing that resolution from the FTC. Thank you, your committee, for all your work this year. And this document will be helpful to us as we have these important conversations and make recommendations around workload over the coming year. Dr. Corley and institutional planning.
So the matter I need to bring today is just a change in membership for the committee, reflecting a change in the organization of administration. And as I noted as I look back over it just now that one of the titles is actually mislabeled. So I'm going to need a request of friendly amendment. I'll take full responsibility for that. So the previous title was Associate Vice President for Institutional Effectiveness Assessment, which covered quality enhancement, accreditation, as well as general assessment across campus. And that was split out into 2 new positions: the Executive Director of Accreditation and Quality Enhancement and the Executive Director of Institutional Effectiveness and Assessment are the correct new titles. In the current draft, it still says Associate Vice President for Institutional Effectiveness and Assessment. So that just needs to be changed to do I need to make the motion for the amendment?
Hester has motioned to motion. Do we have a second? Okay, thank you very much. We can go ahead now and vote on that friendly amendment, which is to change those job titles according to your recommendation. All those who approve? Opposed?
Any abstentions?
All right, so is there any discussion on that change?
And we're only adding we're adding an administrative person because one position was split into two and they both have to be at that
So
meeting?
those two positions cover the quality enhancement plan and accreditation, which is directly called out, as well as the assessment of institutional effectiveness, which cover different parts of the purpose for the committee. So in order to maintain full coverage that had been there in previous years, the recommendation from the committee was to include one of those offices.
I just think it's a little concerning adding more administration to the faculty senate committee.
Further discussion? All right, and are we ready to bring the vote?
Just a point of clarification, voting in the standing committees, as it's in our bylaws, is that just for faculty, or does it also include the votes of administrators on the committees?
It is limited to senators and representatives of departments, colleges, and schools. The ex officio membership, which includes administrators, do not vote.
All right, yeah, good. So all those in favor of updating the membership to reflect the new titles? All those opposed? Any abstaining? Okay, and
Columns. Yeah, sorry.
it passes.
This will now go to the general faculty meeting on April 28th for a vote for general faculty. Thank you. Chair Hester, first the Internationalization Committee.
Yes. I prefer committee on diversity and nationalization for not dicks. But thanks. I have 3 points, make it pretty easy informational item. The committee has been working on this this semester. Number one is our international faculty are vital contributors to the university's mission. Not only are many of them renowned in their fields, among the best, they bring prestige merely by their academic status, but also interpersonally and as individuals. We are regional comprehensive. The vast majority of our students are not only from the United States, but from the state of Georgia, many of whom will never travel outside of the United States, some of whom will never travel outside of the state of Georgia. And the interactions they're able to have with our international faculty provide an intercultural benefit that truly is a value added. So that's point number one. Point number two is we have more than 62 international faculty, although I'm not quite sure exactly how many. So if we define it extremely narrowly and assume that an international faculty is someone who requires a work visa, then currently HR lists 62 of those individuals. They, because of their immigration status, require a certain work visa. But those of us who've been on campus for any amount of years are aware there's more than that. That we have individuals who were perhaps born outside of the US and acquired citizenship before they applied at the University of Georgia. We have individuals who, or University of West Georgia. We have individuals who may have been born on a military base and for whatever reason they have US citizenship, or they have a very specific reason for US citizenship. For whatever reason they lived outside the US most of their lives. We can come up with many different examples of what I'm referring to as a self-identified international faculty. And we're recognizing that those individuals, while they don't require a worker visa, all of the benefits that I described in point number one, they also bring to the table by being a self-identified international faculty. And then finally, my third point is the call for a change in our UWG fact book is what the committee that I chair has asked for and is asking for, and it's going to move forward on, which is simply that currently our our West Georgia Fact Book does not account for or recognize international faculty. If you look at our student profile, we can tell you how many international students we have on our campus. We can tell you what countries they're from. When you go to our faculty profile, there is disaggregated data. We separate full-time from part-time. We can break it down on gender and race, but we don't do so based on their notion of being an international faculty. And so it is our belief as a committee that that should change, that future UWG fact books, starting with AY 24, should acknowledge some of that. It's a model, not necessarily a template, because our international students are recognized based on that international status. Yet I'm arguing that self-identified international faculty should receive recognition on par with our international faculty. So it's not equatable in the same way, but we do think that the UWG fact book should do it. Going back to it's more than 62, but I'm not sure. One of the issues is, how do we discover who our international faculty are? So I was able to, thank you, Provost, able to meet with the Provost, and the Senate Chair presented what I just presented to y'all. And the Provost said, yeah, that makes sense. We should try to do something like this, and mentioned that there are units on campus that we need to be having these conversations with. So our committee is going to spend the next several months having those conversations, figuring out some of the logistical questions of how would we go about acquiring the information to determine who our international faculty are, and which parts of that information would we include in the fact book. I've already heard from several of my colleagues who are self-identified international faculty that have made various suggestions or recommendations about how they would change the fact book, which information they would include. I have yet to speak with anyone who's self-identified international faculty says this is a horrible idea, we shouldn't do this, but I'm open to that. April 27th, the Institute for Faculty Excellence is having a international faculty potluck that will be occurring. I know of at least one faculty who will be at that potluck who is not international faculty. Is a ginger who will be there asking questions of my colleagues about how they feel about this, and also beginning to collect more names, which is what I've been doing up to this point. So that's what's happening from the Committee on Diversity and Internationalization.
Thank you. Questions for Chair Hester? Okay, just a couple items here relevant to general faculty. First of all, do remember that the general faculty meeting is on April 8th, 28th. April 8th would be hard to do, on April 28th. And I believe, has the agenda gone out for that? Okay, it'll be coming out soon. Two items relevant to that meeting will be the election of a Senate Chair-elect and the election of parliamentarian. We have received no nominations for Senate Chair-elect, so apparently I need to smile more when I conduct these meetings. So we will take a moment to receive any nominations from the floor, from the Senate. Anyone online or in person who would like to nominate themselves or the person next to you to serve as Senate Chair-elect. Even if you have a slight inkling, you may register that. Okay, we will continue beating some bushes, talking to some people, and making sure we need two nominees actually for our Chair-elect vote. So we will get that in place by April 28th. If you just have questions about it, you're maybe wondering or curious, but you don't know what it entails, please contact me. I'm happy to go through that with you, talk with you about what is required and then what I'm trying to do, and help you understand the work of that role. So yeah, please reach out. Second, we do have a nomination for the parliamentarian, Martin McPhail. And I don't believe we vote on that item, do we? We do, okay. So we'll vote as a Senate on that nomination, and then that will be put forward to the general faculty as a candidate for parliamentarian on the 28th. So I guess we'll launch the poll.
We don't vote, makes sense.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, good. Does accepting require anything else? It's just been received, I guess. The nomination. Oh, he already accepted the nomination. Okay, well, that's always nice. You hate to elect people who haven't accepted nominations. I believe that brings us to the end of our work. I want to issue a special thank you to the committee chairs for your work. It's been impressive. It's been significant, the amount of work you've had to do and the effectiveness of your committees. I want to thank everyone who has served as a senator. I know we have some people rotating off, and those who have served on the committees as representatives of your departments, schools, colleges, as well as our administrators who have come and participated as ex officio members. To all of you, I give great thanks. This Senate works because of your work. I promise you that. I would not and cannot make the Senate work by myself. So the work of all, and maybe Laura, you could, pretty impressive. But the work of the Senate really is the work of all of us. So thank you for the work you've put in and the effort you've given to our many, many jobs we've had, tasks we've had this year. With that, I'll let you say something.
The Senate does need to accept.
Okay, there's a process. All right.
How do we accept? That's for presence. There will be a but it is acceptance.
Okay. So are we not making a friendly amendment to the poll? Can we avoid that? No. At the time we get done with Martin refused.
Always wise to vote for someone when they're not around.
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Can I nominate someone to whom I haven't spoken, or is that bus throwing?
It
sounds appropriate.
For a fact, you Senate chair?
Yes.
Sure.
Blinn Oliveri.
Nice. Choosing someone here too. So
I will
she
speak
can't-
to Blinn after this meeting about that nomination.
Blinn, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Gavin. Thank you.
Taken already to budget committee. Thank you.
I'll speak to Blinn directly after the meeting. I should note, by the way, faculty, the parliamentarian is both a member of the faculty senate, but also the general faculty, what do they call that body? It includes the provost, the president, Laura, and the parliamentarian. So that's why there'll be a vote from the general faculty as well. I'm actually not a member of it, by the way. Okay. I think we're ready. The vote then is to accept Martin McPhail as faculty senate parliamentarian. And yeah, go ahead. Are you gonna launch the pre-launch the launch?
Pre-launch. Here we go. Do I need to change the language?
No, because I think it's a dual role. I think you do approve or accept for the faculty senate here, and then the faculty, general faculty parliamentarian will be on April 28th. Okay, all those who approve in the room? Any opposed? Abstentions? Looks like we have a new parliamentarian. That brings our meeting to a close. Thank you all so much. Thank you, visitors and proxies, for coming. Have a great summer. We will reconvene most likely in the fall unless there's an urgent need for a meeting either June or July. Thank you again.